When did you live under the roof of a sociopath? Every day at exactly 2:43 p.m., my landlord, Mr. Petrosky, let himself into my apartment while I was at work. He'd unlock the door, walk straight to my living room, and sit on my couch for 30 minutes. Just sitting there, staring at one spot on the wall. I'd installed the camera after things seemed off lately. Clothes not where I left them. My perfume bottles rearranged. Nothing missing, but everything slightly wrong. Now I knew why. I called in sick the next day and hid in my bedroom closet. At 2:43 p.m., I heard my front door open. Through the crack, I watched Mr. Petrosky enter carrying a small bag. He sat on my couch and pulled out something that made my skin crawl. A wig. Long and brown. Exactly like my hair. He placed it carefully on his head, adjusting it in my wall mirror. Then came my lipstick shade from the bag. My signature scarf. He was transforming himself into me, right there in my living room. When he spoke, he pitched his voice higher. Hi, I'm Gracie. I work in marketing. I love yoga and true crime podcasts. He was practicing being me, memorizing my mannerisms from whatever surveillance he'd been doing. I watched in horror as he stood and walked around, imitating my gait. He'd studied me that closely. After 30 minutes, he packed everything away and left. I immediately started packing to leave but needed evidence first. I couldn't break my lease without proof. Over the next week, I documented everything. The security footage showed him escalating, bringing more items. My jewelry he'd somehow copied, clothes identical to mine in his size. One day he brought papers and practiced my signature over and over. Another day he had recordings of my voice, playing them back and mimicking my speech patterns. He was becoming me piece by piece. I finally had enough evidence and planned to leave that weekend. But Thursday, I had to work late. When I checked my camera app, I couldn't believe it. He was there at 8 p.m., off schedule. And he wasn't alone. A woman who looked disturbingly like me was with him. Same height, build, similar features. He was styling her hair to match mine exactly, teaching her to walk like me. They practiced conversations where she pretended to be me talking to my mother, my friends. I called 911 from my office, but by the time police arrived, they were gone. The officers found no trace of them. They took my report but seemed skeptical about the urgency. Suggested I stay with friends and file a restraining order in the morning. I couldn't go back there. I went to a hotel and started calling apartments, desperate to move immediately. That's when I got a text from an unknown number. You're so ungrateful. I gave you such reasonable rent. All I asked in return was to borrow your life a little. Then another. Addison didn't appreciate what she had either. Addison. I searched the name with my address. Found an article from 3 years ago. Addison Durham, previous tenant, had disappeared. She'd complained to police about her landlord's behavior 2 weeks before vanishing. They never found her. My hands shook as more texts arrived. Photos of me at work today, at the coffee shop, getting into my car. He'd been following me everywhere, not just watching in my apartment. I called the police again. This time they took it seriously. 2 officers escorted me back to get my essential belongings. But when we arrived, my apartment door was already open. Inside, sitting on my couch, was the woman from the video, wearing my clothes. She smiled with my lipstick shade. Oh, hello, she said in a voice eerily close to mine. I'm Gracie. I live here. Behind her, Mr. Petrosky emerged from my bedroom carrying my suitcase, packed with my things. He looked at me with cold satisfaction. Time for you to go, Addison. Gracie lives here now. My name is Gracie, I told the officers. Check my ID. This is my apartment. But the woman pulled out a driver's license, with my name, my address, a photo that looked enough like me to pass. The officers looked between us, confused. One started making calls to verify identities. That's when Mr. Petrosky pulled out a gun. I really didn't want it to go this way, he said, pointing it at me while the officers reached for their weapons. But I love your life. I think it's time I'm the new you. The gun goes off and the sound is so loud my ears start ringing immediately. Chunks of plaster fall from the ceiling and dust rains down on all of us. Mr. Petrosky grabs Catalina by the arm and yanks her toward the hallway. One officer chases after them while the other one tackles me against the wall, his body covering mine while he yells for me to stay down. I can't hear him clearly because of the ringing, but I see his mouth moving and feel his weight pressing me into the wall. My legs give out, but he holds me up, one hand on my shoulder and the other on his radio calling for backup. Through the doorway, I see Mr. Petrosky and Catalina running down the hall, and the first officer chasing them with his gun drawn. Then they're gone around the corner and the sounds of footsteps fade away. I'm shaking so hard I can barely stand. The officer keeps asking me something, but I can't focus on his words. His radio is making noise, voices crackling back and forth with updates about the chase. He asks me for my ID, and I just stare at him because my brain isn't working right. He asks again, slower this time, and I finally understand. My purse is on the floor where I dropped it when Mr. Petrosky pulled the gun. I bend down to get it, but my hands are shaking too much to open the zipper. The officer helps me, pulling out my wallet and finding my license. He studies it carefully, then looks at my face, then back at the license. More sounds come through his radio about pursuit in the alley behind the building. Running footsteps echo through the halls, but they're getting farther away. Then silence. 10 minutes pass before the first officer comes back. He's breathing hard and sweating, and I can tell from his face that he's angry. They made it to a car parked in the alley, he tells his partner. Mr. Petrosky fired another shot into the air before they drove off. Now there's a manhunt happening all over the city. The officer asks if I'm okay, and I nod even though I'm not. He guides me to my couch and I sit down in the exact spot where Mr. Petrosky used to sit and practice being me. My hands won't stop shaking no matter how hard I press them together. The officers are talking to each other and into their radios, but I can't follow what they're saying. Everything feels far away and muffled. More officers arrive within 20 minutes. They start taking photos of everything in my apartment. One officer asks me questions about what happened, and I answer the same things over and over. When did Mr. Petrosky arrive? What did he say? Where was the other woman standing? Did I see where they went? Another officer finds the wig and makeup that Mr. Petrosky dropped when he ran. They put the items in plastic bags and label them. A third officer stands on my coffee table and examines the bullet hole in the ceiling, taking measurements and marking it with bright yellow evidence tape. My apartment becomes a crime scene with numbered markers and camera flashes. I sit on my couch and watch it all happen like I'm watching a movie about someone else's life. Around midnight, a new guy shows up. He's in his 40s, wearing a wrinkled shirt and tie, and he looks tired but focused. He introduces himself as Detective Simmons and sits down in my armchair across from me. He actually looks at me when I talk instead of writing notes the whole time. I show him the camera footage on my phone and he connects it to his tablet so he can watch on a bigger screen. His jaw gets tight when he sees Mr. Petrosky practicing my signature over and over. He watches the clips of Mr. Petrosky styling Catalina's hair to match mine. When the video shows Mr. Petrosky walking around my apartment wearing my clothes, Detective Simmons stops the video and looks at me with something that might be anger or might be concern. He promises me this is now a priority case with multiple charges coming. The words sound official and reassuring, but I'm too tired to feel much relief. They can't let me stay here, Detective Simmons explains. My apartment isn't secure anymore and Mr. Petrosky might come back. 2 officers drive me to the police station at 2 a.m. The building is bright and busy even at this hour. They take me to a small room with a table and chairs and a camera in the corner. A woman comes in with coffee and a blanket. She introduces herself as Edith Contreras, a victim advocate. She wraps the blanket around my shoulders because I'm still shaking even though the building is warm. For the next 3 hours, I give a formal statement, walking through every detail from the first time I noticed things were off in my apartment. When did I install the camera? What exactly did I see Mr. Petrosky doing? How many times did he enter my apartment? What items did he bring? Detective Simmons asks questions that make me remember details I'd forgotten. By the time we finish, the windows are getting light with dawn. Edith drives me to a hotel using my credit card that Mr. Petrosky doesn't know about. She brings her laptop inside my room and we sit on the bed changing all my passwords. Email, social media, banking, everything gets new passwords that are random letters and numbers I write down in a notebook. She helps me copy my camera footage to 3 different cloud storage services so nothing can be deleted. We create a safety plan with phone numbers for police, prosecutors, and support services. Edith explains about protective orders and how to file for one. She talks about victim compensation funds that might help pay for my hotel and other costs. Her voice stays calm and steady the whole time, which makes me feel slightly less like I'm drowning. She doesn't leave until I promise to call her if I need anything. After she goes, I sit on the hotel bed staring at the locked door and the chain I've already checked twice. I sleep for 4 hours and wake up to my phone buzzing. 17 missed calls from numbers I don't recognize. My stomach drops when I see them all lined up on my screen. I'm scared to listen to the voicemails, but I force myself to check. Most of them are silent or just breathing sounds. 2 have Mr. Petrosky's voice saying my name over and over. I forward everything to Detective Simmons like Edith told me to do. He texts back right away saying he's been assigned to my case full-time and wants to meet this afternoon. I force myself to get up and go to the hotel breakfast area even though I don't feel hungry. The food tastes like cardboard, but I eat it anyway because Edith said I need to keep my strength up. Detective Simmons arrives at the hotel with 2 officers in the afternoon. They're going to escort me back to my apartment so I can grab essential items. Everything feels wrong when we walk back inside. The yellow evidence tape is still on my ceiling. The dust from the plaster is still on my furniture. Knowing that Mr. Petrosky touched everything and studied every detail of my life makes me want to throw it all away. The officers check every closet and look under my bed and behind my shower curtain before they let me start packing. I grab clothes, my important documents from my desk drawer, my laptop, and the photos of my family from my bookshelf. We pack everything into 2 big suitcases. One officer carries them to the car while the other one stays between me and the door the whole time like Mr. Petrosky might burst in any second. At the police station, a tech specialist named Heidi Wagner takes my phone and laptop into a room with a lot of computer equipment. She's young, maybe 30, with glasses and a serious expression. She connects my devices to her computers and starts running programs I don't understand. After about an hour, she calls me and Detective Simmons in to show us what she found. There's monitoring software on both my phone and laptop that's been running for 6 months. It logged every single thing I typed, every password, every website, every text message. It tracked everywhere I went using my phone's GPS. The software sent copies of everything to an email address that Heidi traced back to Mr. Petrosky. Looking at the screen showing 6 months of my private life being watched makes me feel sick. I run to the bathroom and throw up the cardboard breakfast. When I come back, Heidi has already removed the spyware and set up encrypted backups of all my files on secure drives that only I can access. The next morning, I wake up in the hotel room and force myself to get ready, because I need to pick up some things from a storage unit I rented. I get to the hotel parking garage and slide into my car, turn the key, and nothing happens. The engine doesn't even try to turn over. My hands start shaking because I'm thinking about Mr. Petrosky and what else he might have done to my car. I call the hotel desk and they send their maintenance guy who looks under the hood and can't find anything obvious. He suggests calling a mechanic. The mechanic arrives an hour later and puts my car up on a lift. He crawls underneath and comes back holding a small black box with a magnet on one side. He asks if I know what it is. I stare at the GPS tracker in his hand and feel sick. The mechanic hands it to me carefully and I immediately call Detective Simmons. He arrives within 20 minutes and bags the tracker as evidence, writing down the make and model. He arranges for my car to be towed to the police garage where it'll stay until the case is resolved. I feel like Mr. Petrosky has infected every single part of my life, from my apartment to my devices to my car. Nothing feels safe anymore. Back at the hotel, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. It's someone from my bank's fraud department asking if I tried to reset my password this morning. I tell her no, and she explains they blocked 3 attempts from an IP address somewhere in the city. We spend 40 minutes on the phone freezing all my accounts and setting up completely new ones with security questions only I would know. Things like my grandmother's middle name and the street I lived on in 2nd grade. The banker's voice drops lower and she mentions that 3 other customers reported similar attempts this week. All of them are women. All of them live in buildings that Mr. Petrosky manages. I write down their names even though I don't know what I can do with the information. The bank promises to monitor everything closely and flag any suspicious activity. I call my boss Delilah from the hotel room and try to explain what's happening without falling apart. I tell her about the camera footage and the impersonation, and that I need to work from home for a while. She doesn't ask a lot of questions, but I can hear the shock in her voice. She tells me to take whatever time I need and that she'll handle everything at the office. Within an hour, she texts me that building security has been alerted about potential impersonation attempts. HR flagged my employee records with a special code that requires in-person verification for any changes. She also mentions that she told the front desk staff to call her directly if anyone claiming to be me shows up. The support helps, but I'm also embarrassed that my personal nightmare is spilling into my professional life. That afternoon, an elderly woman I barely know from across the hall shows up at the precinct. Her name is Mrs. Chen, and she's holding a USB drive in her shaking hands. She tells Detective Simmons that her hallway camera has been recording for months because of package theft problems. She went through the footage after hearing about what happened in my apartment. The USB contains clips of Mr. Petrosky entering my apartment 47 times over 3 months. He's always carrying bags in and bags out. Sometimes he's there for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Detective Simmons sits down at a computer and watches the footage timeline. His face gets harder with each clip. He thanks Mrs. Chen and makes copies of everything. I watch some of the footage with him and feel violated all over again seeing Mr. Petrosky casually walking in and out of my home like he owned it. The next day, Lucas Meyer, the prosecutor, meets with me and Edith in a conference room at the courthouse. He's younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair and glasses. He spreads out papers on the table and walks me through the criminal charges they're building against Mr. Petrosky: stalking, residential burglary, identity theft, weapons violations. The list keeps growing. He explains that the restraining order will provide immediate legal protection, even while the criminal case builds. His confidence makes me feel slightly better, but I can't stop thinking about Mr. Petrosky firing that gun. I tell Lucas that a piece of paper won't stop someone who already showed he's willing to use violence. Lucas nods and says that's why they're prioritizing the case and why Detective Simmons is assigned full-time. He explains the process for filing a temporary restraining order and what happens at the hearing. The courthouse the next morning is overwhelming with metal detectors and security lines and hallways packed with people. Edith guides me through the process while I fill out forms describing everything Mr. Petrosky did. I request that he stay 500 feet away from me, my workplace, and my family. The forms ask for specific incidents and I write about the camera footage, the wig, the impersonation, the gun. My hand cramps from writing so much detail. We submit the packet with all my evidence to the clerk who reviews it and schedules us for a hearing that afternoon. The judge is a tired-looking woman in her 50s who reads through my evidence packet while I sit in the courtroom trying not to shake. She asks me a few questions about the gun incident and the surveillance. Then she grants a temporary order valid for 2 weeks until the full hearing. The relief hits me so hard I almost cry. Rafael Soto from building management meets with Detective Simmons and me the following day in a sterile conference room at their corporate office. I expect support, or at least concern, but instead I get corporate speak and deflection. Rafael sits across from us in an expensive suit and claims Mr. Petrosky was a model landlord for 12 years. He suggests maybe I misunderstood his intentions, or that there could be another explanation for the camera footage. His tone makes it clear he's more worried about liability than my safety. Detective Simmons leans forward and mentions Addison Durham's disappearance 3 years ago. Rafael's face goes pale and he shifts in his chair but doesn't say anything useful. He promises to review their landlord screening procedures and ends the meeting quickly. Walking out, I feel angry that the people who were supposed to protect tenants just looked the other way for years. Detective Simmons spends the next few days canvassing hair salons near Mr. Petrosky's properties. He finds the stylist who worked on Catalina at a place called Sheer Perfection, about 6 blocks from my old apartment. The stylist remembers the appointment clearly because it was so unusual. Mr. Petrosky sat there the entire time showing her photos of me from every angle. He insisted on an exact match down to the way my hair falls over my left ear. The stylist felt uncomfortable, but he paid cash and tipped well, so she did the work. She provides a written statement and security footage from that day. Detective Simmons shows me the footage on his tablet, and I watch Mr. Petrosky directing every cut and color choice while Catalina sits in the chair. There are photos of me everywhere, spread across the counter. It's like watching someone build a copy of me piece by piece. A few days later, the postal inspector contacts Detective Simmons about a mail forwarding order that was submitted in my name. The order would have redirected all my mail to an address I've never heard of in a neighborhood across town. The signature on the form is a near-perfect copy of mine. The inspector shows us the paperwork, and I can barely tell it's not my actual signature. They intercepted the order before it went into effect, and flagged my address for monitoring. Over the next week, they catch 2 more fraudulent forwarding attempts, each one using slightly different variations of my signature. The postal inspector explains that someone was practicing, getting better each time. The systematic nature of it makes my skin crawl. My gym calls while I'm working from the hotel room. The manager explains that someone matching my description tried to check in using my membership earlier that day. The desk staff felt something was off about the way she moved and talked. They asked for additional ID, and the woman didn't have any, so she left quickly. The manager emails me security footage, and I watch Catalina wearing my typical workout clothes, black leggings, and a gray tank top. Her hair is styled exactly like mine. She walks up to the desk practicing my walk, the way I shift my weight slightly to the left. The desk staff member who stopped her probably saved me from another identity theft attempt. I send the footage to Detective Simmons, and he adds it to the growing evidence file. Lucas Meyer calls me 2 days later to explain he's filing for search warrants based on everything we've collected. He walks me through the evidence list over the phone while I sit in my hotel room taking notes. The GPS tracker under my car, the monitoring software Heidi found on my devices, the mail forwarding attempts with forged signatures, security footage from the gym showing Catalina trying to use my membership, witness statements from the hairstylist, the postal inspector, my neighbor with the hallway camera. He tells me they'll search for more surveillance equipment, identity documents, anything connecting to Addison's disappearance 3 years ago. His voice sounds confident, but I can tell he's being careful not to promise specific results. The warrant application goes to a judge that afternoon. Lucas texts me 48 hours later with one word: approved. I stare at my phone screen feeling something between relief and dread, because now things are really moving forward. Heidi calls me the next morning asking me to come to the precinct tech lab. When I arrive, she's sitting at a computer with multiple windows open, her face lit by the blue glow of the screens. She points to lines of code I don't understand, and explains she found email auto-forward filters buried in my account settings. Every email I sent or received was automatically copied to a burner address I'd never seen before. Personal emails to my mom, work correspondence with clients, online shopping confirmations with my credit card details, everything. She traced the filter setup to a library computer across town, then pulled security camera footage from the library showing Mr. Petrosky at that exact terminal 6 months ago. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, but the timestamp matches perfectly. Heidi clicks through more screens showing the scope of it. Thousands of emails copied over half a year. He read every conversation I had, knew every purchase I made, tracked every interaction. The violation makes my skin crawl worse than the apartment cameras because this felt private in a way physical space didn't. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number while I'm still at the precinct. A photo of me walking into the police garage this morning. Then another text. A photo of me at the hotel coffee shop yesterday. Then another. Me getting into my car outside the storage facility. The messages keep coming with photos from the past week, each one showing me at different locations around the city. The captions say things that make my hands shake. You can't hide from yourself. I'm you now. You're nobody. Why are you making this so difficult? Edith appears in the doorway of the tech lab like she knew I'd need her. She sits next to me and helps me screenshot each message with timestamps, documenting everything methodically, even though my fingers are trembling so badly I keep dropping my phone. She talks to me in her calm voice about evidence and patterns, while I try not to think about how he's been following me everywhere, taking photos, watching me move through my temporary life. 16 messages arrive before they finally stop. 16 photos proving I have no privacy left anywhere. Delilah calls that afternoon while I'm back at the hotel trying to focus on work emails. She tells me she talked to HR and they're setting me up for full remote work for the next month. All my meetings will be video calls with my background blurred, so nobody can see where I'm staying. She explains that my coworkers know something serious happened, but she kept details private like I asked. They're being respectful about not asking questions. The structure of work tasks becomes my lifeline over the next few days. Responding to client emails, reviewing marketing reports, attending video meetings where I pretend everything is normal. My hotel room fills up with evidence folders and police documents, but I carve out a corner with my laptop where I can focus on deliverables and deadlines. The normalcy of work helps me feel slightly human, even though I'm living in a temporary room surrounded by proof of how my life fell apart. The restraining order hearing happens 2 weeks later in a courthouse packed with people waiting for various cases. Lucas meets me outside the courtroom and walks me through what to expect. Mr. Petrosky's lawyer is there. a sharp woman in an expensive suit who looks at me like I'm wasting everyone's time. The hearing starts and she immediately tries to paint me as paranoid. She suggests the camera footage shows normal landlord maintenance visits, nothing more. She claims the wig could be explained as a costume for a party. She makes it sound like I'm overreacting to innocent behavior. But then Lucas presents the evidence methodically. The wig with my exact hair color and style, the forged signature practice sheets, the gym security footage showing Catalina trying to impersonate me, the email forwarding proof, the GPS tracker. Each piece builds on the last until the judge's expression changes from neutral to hard. She asks Mr. Petrosky's lawyer if she has any explanation for the totality of the evidence. The lawyer tries to deflect, but the judge cuts her off. She grants a 1-year protective order requiring Mr. Petrosky to stay 500 feet away from me, my workplace, and my family. No contact of any kind. I feel my shoulders relax slightly for the first time in weeks. 3 days after the hearing, I'm sitting in a coffee shop near my hotel trying to work on my laptop when I glance up and see her. Catalina. She's across the street wearing jeans and a sweater instead of my clothes, but her hair is still styled exactly like mine. She's looking at her phone, not at me, but something about her posture feels wrong. I grab my phone with shaking hands and start recording video through the window. She walks slowly down the sidewalk, her gait matching mine in that disturbing way I saw in the apartment footage. I send the video to Detective Simmons with my location and the timestamp. My heart pounds while I watch her through the glass. She disappears into a crowd of people near a bus stop before I see any police cars arrive. Detective Simmons calls me 10 minutes later saying officers checked the area, but she was already gone. He tells me I did the right thing by recording and not confronting her. I stay in the coffee shop for another hour because I'm too scared to walk back to my hotel alone. My neighbor from the old apartment building calls Detective Simmons at 3 a.m. to report Mr. Petrosky's car parked on our street, idling near the entrance. She recognized the vehicle from when she gave him the hallway camera footage. She says the car sat there for almost 15 minutes with the engine running before driving away slowly. By the time officers respond 20 minutes later, he's completely gone. Detective Simmons calls me at 7 that morning to tell me what happened. The delayed response makes me feel sick because I realize how vulnerable I am during those gaps. 20 minutes is forever when someone dangerous is watching and waiting. He could do anything in 20 minutes. The protective order means nothing if nobody can enforce it fast enough. Detective Simmons requests extra patrol coverage for my hotel and my workplace, but when he calls to update me, his voice sounds frustrated. The department is understaffed and they can only manage drive-bys every few hours. He gives me his personal cell number and tells me to call immediately if I see anything suspicious, day or night. The gaps between patrols feel enormous. 3 hours between each check. 3 hours where anything could happen and nobody would know until the next scheduled pass. I start timing the patrols from my hotel window, watching for the marked cars, counting the minutes until they come back around. The math makes me anxious. So much empty time with no protection. The storage unit manager calls me a week later saying there are scratches around my lock and the security camera was angled away from my unit. My stomach drops while she explains they noticed it during a routine check. We drive over there together and she shows me the footage from 2 nights ago. Someone in a dark hoodie appears at 4 a.m. with lockpicks, working on my unit for almost 10 minutes before giving up and leaving. The camera angle shifts right before they arrive, pointed at the ceiling instead of the hallway. We change to a higher security lock that's harder to pick and add a second camera that uploads footage continuously to cloud storage instead of just recording locally. The manager promises to check my unit daily, but the fact that someone tried to access my belongings in the middle of the night makes me feel hunted. Nothing is safe. Not my apartment, not my storage, not anywhere I exist. A journalist contacts me through Edith a few days later, saying she's been researching tenant rights issues and found something disturbing. She shares her research files showing a pattern of complaints against Mr. Petrosky going back 8 years across multiple properties he managed. 4 previous tenants reported feeling watched or having items moved in their apartments. All of them signed NDAs after building management offered small settlements to make the complaints go away. The journalist has copies of the settlement agreements with names redacted. She shows me complaint summaries that sound exactly like my experience. Clothes moved slightly, perfume bottles rearranged, the feeling of being studied. Each tenant accepted money and agreed never to discuss what happened. The pattern makes my skin crawl because it means this wasn't random. He's done this before, refined his methods, learned from each attempt. I was just the latest target in a long series of women he studied and violated. The journalist asks if I'll talk to her on record after the criminal case concludes. I tell her maybe, but right now I just want him stopped permanently. I sit in a small room at the precinct with Edith next to me, her hand resting on the table between us like she's ready to reach out if I need it. The walls are beige and bare except for a clock that ticks, so loud I can hear it over the hum of the fluorescent lights. Detective Simmons left an hour ago to supervise the search warrant at Mr. Petrosky's house, and every minute that passes feels like 10. Edith tries to distract me with questions about my job and where I grew up, but I can barely focus on her words. My phone sits face up on the table and I stare at it, waiting for it to light up with news. When it finally rings 2 hours later, I grab it so fast I almost knock over Edith's coffee. Detective Simmons sounds different from usual, his voice tight and careful like he's trying not to let his feelings show. He tells me they found 7 wigs in Mr. Petrosky's bedroom closet, each one a different style but all matching my hair color and length from different points over the past few years. There are notebooks filled with pages of my signature, practiced over and over until the forgeries look almost perfect. Hundreds of photos of me are taped to the walls of a spare bedroom, organized by location and date like some kind of surveillance timeline. They're still processing a locked room in the basement that they had to break into, and he says the evidence is filling 3 police vans parked outside. I thank him and hang up, then sit there staring at my phone while my hands shake. Edith asks if I'm okay, and I tell her what they found, my voice coming out flat and mechanical because I don't know how else to say it. She squeezes my hand and says, "This is good. This is exactly what we need to build the case." But all I can think about is Mr. Petrosky studying those photos and practicing my signature like he was preparing for a test. 3 days later, Heidi calls me while I'm eating lunch in my hotel room. She works in the fraud division, and her voice is sharp and professional when she explains that someone tried to alter my driver's license records at the DMV yesterday. The person used forged documents that looked official enough to get past the first check, but the employee felt something was wrong about the whole interaction, and stalled by saying the system was running slow. After the person left, the employee reported it to her supervisor and they pulled the security footage. Heidi sends me a screenshot from the video, and I stare at a blurry image of a woman who might be Catalina, but the camera angle and image quality make it impossible to be completely sure. The woman is wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, and she kept her face turned away from the camera like she knew where it was. Heidi says they're trying to enhance the footage, but it might not be clear enough for positive identification. She flags my records with multiple alerts, so any future attempts will trigger immediate notifications to law enforcement. I thank her and hang up, then sit on my bed feeling sick because they're still out there trying to erase me from official records. My bank's fraud department calls that same afternoon while I'm in the shower. I miss the call and have to wait 10 minutes for them to call back, which feels like forever. The woman on the phone explains that they blocked a wire transfer attempt for $8,000 from my checking account to an overseas account I've never heard of. The request came through their proper channels with all the right paperwork and my signature on the authorization form. She says the forgery is good enough that it fooled their initial screening, and it took a handwriting expert comparing it to my signature on file to spot the tiny differences. They've frozen my account temporarily while they investigate, and I need to come in person with 2 forms of ID to verify my identity and sign new authorization forms. I write down the address and appointment time, my hand shaking so hard the numbers come out crooked. The next morning, a courier delivers a thick envelope to my hotel room. I sign for it without thinking, then open it to find an eviction notice from Mr. Petrosky's lawyer. The legal language is dense and formal, but the basic message is clear. They claim I abandoned the property and owe 3 months of back rent plus damages. The notice gives me 10 days to respond or face eviction proceedings. I call Lucas immediately, my voice shaking with anger and fear. He tells me to scan the documents and email them to him right away, which I do from the hotel's business center. He calls back an hour later and says he's filing an emergency motion for constructive eviction, arguing that I was forced to leave due to my landlord's criminal behavior and ongoing threats to my safety. His voice is calm and confident when he assures me this is a desperate move that won't succeed, but the legal paperwork feels like another violation on top of everything else. I spend the rest of the day feeling like Mr. Petrosky is attacking me from every direction at once, using lawyers and banks and government offices as weapons. Edith meets me for coffee the next morning at a shop near the hotel. She looks tired, and I wonder if she's been working on my case late into the night. We sit in a corner booth away from other customers, and she tells me we need to talk about social media. I've been thinking about posting a warning on Facebook or Twitter, something to alert other tenants in Mr. Petrosky's buildings about what he's capable of. Edith listens while I explain my reasoning, then gently but firmly advises against it. She says anything I post publicly could be used by his defense lawyer to claim I'm trying to poison the jury pool or harass their client. We agree to limit information sharing to people who directly need to know, which means police, prosecutors, my employer, and close family. Nobody else. The isolation of not being able to talk about it publicly feels like it's pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I want to scream about what happened to me from every platform available, but instead I have to stay silent and trust the legal system to work. My mother calls that evening, her voice high and panicked in a way I haven't heard since I was a kid. Someone claiming to be me contacted her earlier today, calling from a number she didn't recognize. The person asked questions about my childhood, wanting stories about birthday parties and family vacations, and what I was like as a teenager. My mother says something felt wrong about the voice, like someone was trying too hard to sound like me. She made an excuse about needing to go and hung up, then immediately called my cell phone to make sure I was okay. We spend 20 minutes creating a family password system that anyone calling has to provide before we'll discuss personal information. I choose a phrase only my mother and I would know, something from a private joke we've shared for years. The fact that Mr. Petrosky tried to infiltrate my family relationships makes me so angry I want to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I grip it tight and promise my mother I'll keep her updated on everything happening with the case. Detective Simmons calls 2 days later with news about the gun. The weapon Mr. Petrosky fired in my apartment has been traced to a straw buyer who purchased it from a licensed dealer 3 years ago. The buyer has connections to Mr. Petrosky through property management records. They worked together on maintenance contracts for several buildings. When police interview him, He claims he sold the gun privately years ago and didn't keep any records of the transaction because private sales don't require documentation in our state. Detective Simmons doesn't believe him and says the guy's story has holes big enough to drive a truck through. The weapons charge adds serious time to Mr. Petrosky's potential sentence, especially combined with the fact that he fired it during a confrontation with police officers. I feel a grim satisfaction knowing that pulling the gun might have been the mistake that puts him away for years. Detective Simmons picks me up from the hotel 3 days later in an unmarked car. He's taking me to view a storage unit Mr. Petrosky rented near his properties, one they discovered through financial records during the investigation. We drive in silence because I don't know what to say, and he seems to understand I need quiet. The storage facility is one of those big complexes with hundreds of identical orange doors, and we meet 2 other officers there who've already opened the unit. Detective Simmons asks if I'm ready, and I nod even though I'm not sure I am. Inside the unit are duplicates of my furniture arranged exactly like my apartment layout. The same couch, the same coffee table, the same bookshelf with books organized by height just like mine. My dishes are stacked in boxes. My decorations are wrapped in bubble wrap. My clothes hang on a portable rack. Labels on the boxes read things like Gracie's winter clothes, and Gracie's books, and Gracie's kitchen items, in handwriting I recognize as his. I stand in the doorway staring at this replica of my life that he built in secret, and the room starts to spin. Detective Simmons catches my elbow and guides me outside where I sit on the curb with my head between my knees, trying not to throw up. He brings me water from his car and sits next to me without saying anything, just letting me process what I saw. Lucas calls me that evening to say he's filing formal charges. The list is long and serious. Aggravated stalking, residential burglary, forgery, identity theft, and weapons violations. An arrest warrant has been issued with bail set extremely high due to flight risk and the ongoing danger he poses to me. Lucas sounds confident when he walks me through each charge and the potential sentences, adding up to decades in prison if Mr. Petrosky is convicted on everything. But I know he's still out there somewhere, still free and still planning. The prosecutor's confidence helps me feel slightly more secure, but every time I hear a noise in the hotel hallway, I jump. Every time my phone buzzes with an unknown number, I freeze. He's proven he can get to me in ways I never expected, and a warrant doesn't stop someone who's already shown they don't care about rules or laws. The next morning, Heidi sends me a link to a blog post that appeared overnight on a website I've never heard of. The post is titled something about living authentically by becoming your ideal self. I read through it with growing horror as the anonymous author describes studying someone's life in detail, learning their patterns and preferences, gradually taking over their identity piece by piece. It's presented as philosophical exploration, like the author is discussing an interesting thought experiment rather than describing actual crimes. The writing style feels familiar in a way that makes my skin crawl, and certain phrases sound like things Mr. Petrosky might say. Detective Simmons traces the IP address to a public library downtown, but when he checks their security footage from that time frame, it's already been automatically overwritten by their system. The post stays up for 3 days before the website administrators take it down, but I save screenshots of everything because I know it matters, even if we can't prove who wrote it. 2 days later, a client from my biggest account forwards me an email asking why I'm suggesting they switch to a different vendor for their printing needs. I stare at the message in confusion because I never sent anything like that. Delilah comes to my desk within minutes of me calling her, and we pull up the email headers together. The sender address is almost identical to mine, but with 1 letter different in the domain name, so subtle most people wouldn't notice unless they looked carefully. My hands shake as we search my sent folder and find nothing because I didn't send it. Someone created a fake email address that looks exactly like mine, and they're contacting my professional network pretending to be me. Delilah immediately alerts our IT department, and they help us send corrections to everyone in my contact list with warnings about impersonation attempts. We spend 3 hours going through my professional connections and flagging my account with additional security measures. The IT guy mentions this level of email spoofing takes planning and technical knowledge, which makes everything feel worse because it means Mr. Petrosky has been studying my professional life as carefully as my personal one. By the end of the day, we've contacted 47 clients and colleagues with warnings, and my face burns with shame even though I know I didn't do anything wrong. The hotel bill hits my credit card that week, and the total makes me feel sick because I can't afford to stay there much longer. Delilah notices me staring at my laptop during lunch and asks what's wrong, so I explain about the hotel costs adding up faster than I expected. She makes a phone call right there in the break room, and 20 minutes later tells me her company has corporate housing they use for relocating employees. The apartment complex is across town with security gates that require key cards, cameras covering every entrance and exit, and a front desk staffed around the clock where visitors have to show ID and get approved before entering. We drive over after work to look at the available unit, and it's smaller than my old place. More generic with basic furniture and white walls that feel like a doctor's office. But the front desk guard checks both our IDs carefully and explains their security procedures in detail, walking us through the camera system and the panic buttons installed in each unit. I sign a short-term lease that evening, and Delilah helps me move my few belongings from the hotel 2 days later. The new place doesn't feel like home, but when I lock the door that first night and test the deadbolt 3 times, I sleep better than I have in weeks, knowing there's actual security between me and whoever might be looking for me. My friend Jessica texts me the next week asking if I'm okay, because she ran into me at a downtown bar last Thursday. but I seemed really off. I stare at the message because I was at the corporate housing last Thursday, watching TV and eating takeout alone. I call her immediately and she describes seeing me, or someone who looked exactly like me, sitting at the bar with another woman. Jessica said she came over to say hello, and the person knew details about our friendship, remembered inside jokes, and asked about Jessica's new job. But something felt wrong about the whole conversation. The responses were slightly delayed and the laugh didn't sound quite right. And when Jessica suggested we grab dinner soon, the person made a vague excuse and left quickly. I feel cold as Jessica talks because she's describing Catalina using information about my life that she learned from Mr. Petrosky's surveillance. My other friend Marcus calls that same evening with a similar story from a coffee shop 3 days ago. He thought I was being weird and distant, but now understands it wasn't actually me. I realize my social circle is shrinking because I can't trust who's real anymore. Every interaction might be Catalina practicing being me or gathering more information to use later. I stop responding to casual hangout invitations because the thought of my friends running into my impersonator again makes me want to throw up. Within the week, Detective Simmons calls with news that sounds almost too good to be true. The vendor who sold Mr. Petrosky the wig saw news coverage about the case and contacted the police department. She provides detailed receipts from 8 months ago showing the purchase along with notes from their consultation. Detective Simmons reads me her statement over the phone, and my stomach twists as she describes how Mr. Petrosky brought in multiple photos of me from different angles, insisting on an exact color match and asking detailed questions about styling and maintenance. The vendor remembered him clearly because he mentioned he was helping his daughter surprise someone for a special event, which seemed odd at the time, but she didn't think much of it. The crucial detail comes at the end of her statement when she recalls him mentioning a storage unit in a specific neighborhood on the south side where he was keeping party supplies. Detective Simmons sounds energized as he explains this, gives investigators a new lead to follow because they can check storage facilities in that area for units rented under Mr. Petrosky's name or his known aliases. I thank him for the update and sit in my corporate housing living room, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in days, because finally there's a concrete lead that might actually go somewhere. Detective Simmons calls me 3 days later to explain he's planning a coordinated operation to serve search warrants at 3 locations at the same time. The first location is the storage unit address they identified from the wig vendor's information. The second is Mr. Petrosky's official residence listed on his property management paperwork. The third is a property he owns but claims is vacant, which financial records show has active utility bills suggesting someone is living there. He walks me through the timing so I know exactly when the operation will happen and can stay somewhere secure with officers nearby during the execution. The operation is scheduled for early morning in 2 days when they're most likely to find people at home and least likely to encounter resistance. Detective Simmons arranges for 2 officers to stay at my corporate housing building during the operation in case Mr. Petrosky somehow gets wind of the warrants and tries to run or retaliate. I spend those 2 days barely sleeping, checking my phone constantly, and jumping at every noise in the hallway. The morning of the operation, I sit in my living room with the 2 officers while Detective Simmons texts me updates every 30 minutes. The waiting feels endless and my coffee goes cold in my hands as I stare at my phone screen. The call comes at 9:45 in the morning and Detective Simmons sounds tired but satisfied. The operation found Catalina at the vacant property living in a furnished apartment filled with photos of me covering the walls like wallpaper. My clothes hang in the closet organized by color just like I organize mine. My favorite books sit on shelves with sticky notes marking pages I highlighted in my copies. Makeup matching my shades lines the bathroom counter, and even the furniture placement mirrors my old apartment layout. Detective Simmons says Catalina surrendered immediately when officers entered, asking for a lawyer and crying as they handcuffed her. She kept saying she wanted to cooperate and that she was scared. He tells me she's in custody now at the precinct being processed, and I feel something complicated twist in my chest. Part of me feels relief that she can't impersonate me anymore. Part of me feels anger at this woman who helped steal my face and my life. But another part feels something almost like pity, because the way Detective Simmons describes her surrender makes her sound more like another victim than a criminal mastermind. I thank him for the update and sit with the 2 officers in my living room trying to process what it means that Catalina is caught. But Mr. Petrosky is still out there somewhere planning his next move. Catalina's lawyer contacts the prosecutor's office within hours of her arrest and arranges what Lucas calls a proffer session. He explains this is where Catalina can provide information in exchange for consideration on her charges, though nothing she says can be used against her if negotiations break down. Lucas invites me to listen to a recording of the session afterward, and I sit in his office with Edith while he plays the audio file. Catalina's voice shakes as she describes how Mr. Petrosky found her at a homeless shelter 6 months ago. He offered her housing in exchange for what he called acting work, showing her photos of me and saying he needed someone to help with a special project. She explains the first few weeks were normal, just living in the furnished apartment and occasionally trying on wigs and clothes. Then gradually he revealed more of what he wanted, teaching her to walk like me and talk like me and memorize details about my life. The grooming happened so slowly she didn't realize how wrong it was until she was already dependent on the housing and scared of being homeless again. Her voice drops to almost a whisper when she mentions Addison Durham's belongings stored in a unit she was never allowed to enter. She says Mr. Petrosky told her Addison didn't appreciate what she had, and that's why she had to leave. But the way he said it made Catalina terrified of ending up like Addison if she didn't cooperate. Lucas stops the recording and looks at me with an expression that says he believes her story. I feel angry and sad at the same time because Catalina helped terrorize me, but she was also being terrorized herself. Heidi calls me 2 days later after finishing her analysis of devices seized from Catalina's apartment. She found practice files on a laptop showing deepfake videos where Mr. Petrosky was teaching Catalina to mimic my voice and mannerisms using manipulated footage of me. Heidi walks me through the files over the phone and describes how they show a clear progression from obvious fakes that look computer-generated to increasingly convincing impersonations that could fool someone who knows me casually. The earliest files are from 4 months ago, with my face badly mapped onto Catalina's body, and my voice sounding robotic and wrong. The most recent files from 2 weeks ago show Catalina moving and speaking in ways that make my skin crawl, because they look and sound so much like me. Heidi explains the software Mr. Petrosky used requires technical knowledge and significant processing power, suggesting he's been planning this for much longer than the physical surveillance indicated. The sophistication of everything makes me feel cold, because it means he wasn't just obsessed. He was methodical and patient, and willing to invest serious time and resources into stealing my identity. I thank Heidi for the information, and spend the rest of the day feeling like I'm going to be sick. The taunting email arrives the next morning from a new burner account I've never seen before. The subject line just says my name, and when I open it, there's a photo of me leaving my corporate housing building that same morning. I'm wearing the blue jacket I put on 2 hours ago and carrying the coffee cup I bought at the shop down the street. My hands shake so badly I almost drop my phone as I forward the email to Detective Simmons. He calls me back within minutes, and I can hear the frustration in his voice as he explains the metadata shows the email was sent from a phone near my building, but not close enough to pinpoint an exact location. The message is clear even without words because the photo proves Mr. Petrosky is still watching me and still free, despite all the evidence against him and all the warrants and all the security measures. Detective Simmons promises to increase patrol coverage around my building, and suggests I vary my routines and avoid predictable patterns. I spend the rest of the day inside my apartment with the curtains closed, too scared to leave even though I know hiding won't actually keep me safe. The hearing for extending my temporary restraining order happens the following week in the same courtroom where I got the initial order. Lucas presents all the new evidence, including the email impersonation attempts, Catalina's testimony, the deepfake videos, and the taunting email with my photo. Mr. Petrosky doesn't appear in person, and his lawyer argues via speakerphone that he's exercising his right to avoid his accuser, and that his absence shouldn't be held against him. The judge's face gets hard as she listens to the lawyer's argument, and she interrupts him to say that failing to appear at a hearing about stalking and threats doesn't suggest innocence. She grants a full 1-year protective order with the same 500-foot distance requirement, and adds a new provision requiring electronic monitoring if Mr. Petrosky is arrested. Lucas looks satisfied as we leave the courtroom, but I feel empty because a piece of paper and a theoretical ankle monitor don't mean anything when the person violating the order is still free and still watching me from somewhere I can't see. The next week, Raphael from building management calls to schedule a meeting at his office. He sits across from me and Detective Simmons with a stack of files about Mr. Petrosky's 12-year employment managing their properties. Raphael's hands shake slightly as he admits they received complaints from 4 other tenants over the years about feeling watched or having items moved in their apartments. Each time Mr. Petrosky provided explanations that seemed reasonable enough, and the corporate ownership structure required so much paperwork to terminate a property manager that they just accepted his stories and moved on. Raphael looks sick as he explains the company is finally starting the removal process, but the layers of corporate approval mean it will take at least 6 weeks to complete. I feel angry listening to how their bureaucracy let Mr. Petrosky operate for years, but at least they're acting now instead of protecting him. Detective Simmons takes copies of all the complaint files to add to the investigation. 2 weeks pass with no new incidents, and I start working in the office 3 days a week instead of staying home constantly. Delilah walks me from the parking garage to my floor every morning, and we have lunch together in the building cafeteria, where there are always people around. I'm sitting at my desk on a Thursday afternoon when my phone rings with a call from building security. The guard tells me they spotted someone matching Mr. Petrosky's description in the garage trying to access the elevator using a contractor's badge that looked wrong. They locked down the garage and called police while I grab my laptop and run to Delilah's office. She locks her door and we wait together while my heart pounds so hard against my ribs, I think I might pass out. My hands won't stop shaking as I try to focus on breathing slowly. Delilah holds my hand and doesn't say anything, just sits with me while we wait for the all clear. Detective Simmons calls 30 minutes later and his voice sounds different, lighter somehow. Officers arrested Mr. Petrosky in the garage stairwell without any fight or trouble. He was carrying lockpicks, a taser, and another fake driver's license with my name and photo on it. I start crying so hard I can't speak, and Delilah takes the phone to get details while I sob into my hands. Edith arrives at the office 20 minutes later and sits with me in a conference room while I process that he's actually in custody this time, not just running away. The relief feels almost painful, like something locked tight in my chest finally releasing. Mr. Petrosky's initial court appearance happens 2 days later via video link while he's held at the county jail. I watch from the prosecutor's office with Lucas and Edith on either side of me. Mr. Petrosky's lawyer argues for GPS monitoring and home detention, claiming his client isn't a flight risk and has strong community ties. Lucas stands up and presents evidence from the garage incident, including the weapons, fake ID, and violation of the protective order requiring him to stay 500 feet from my workplace. The judge's face gets hard as she reviews the evidence and denies bail entirely, ordering Mr. Petrosky held until trial. Knowing he's locked up behind bars with no way to get out lets me breathe fully for the first time in weeks. The constant tension in my shoulders starts to ease slightly. Lucas schedules me to give a detailed recorded statement the next morning at the prosecutor's office. I sit in a small room with a camera and microphone while Lucas asks questions, and I walk through everything from the first camera footage of Mr. Petrosky sitting on my couch to yesterday's arrest in the garage. It takes 4 hours to cover all the details, and I drink 3 bottles of water because my mouth keeps getting dry. Lucas explains this recording will be used for trial preparation and potentially as part of victim impact statements if we get to sentencing. Talking through all of it in order like that makes me realize how much I survived, how many times Mr. Petrosky escalated, and I kept documenting and protecting myself. 3 days later, Catalina takes a cooperation deal in exchange for testifying against Mr. Petrosky. Lucas calls to explain she's providing detailed information about his methods, and the deal includes probation instead of jail time. Catalina describes how Mr. Petrosky chose tenants based on specific criteria, including women who lived alone, had stable jobs, and limited family nearby. She explains how he installed tiny cameras and audio devices during maintenance visits, studied their patterns for months, and planned the identity replacement in careful stages. Her testimony reveals he attempted this same process with at least 2 other women who moved away before he completed it, scared off by the feeling of being watched. The information makes me feel cold because it shows how methodical he was, how this wasn't just about me, but about a pattern he'd developed and refined. Detective Simmons gets a warrant for another storage unit based on Catalina's information about a facility Mr. Petrosky used for older belongings. I wait at the corporate housing while they execute the warrant, checking my phone every few minutes for updates. Detective Simmons calls 3 hours later and his voice sounds careful, like he's choosing words to avoid upsetting me. Inside the unit, they found boxes labeled with Addison Durham's name containing her belongings, documents, and photos. No remains were found, but the evidence suggests Mr. Petrosky was planning the same identity theft with her before she disappeared 3 years ago. The case gets reopened with new urgency, and a detective from the original investigation contacts Addison's family with the update. I spend the rest of the day feeling sick, thinking about how I could have ended up like her if I hadn't installed that camera when I did. Media coverage increases after Addison's connection becomes public, and a local news station runs a story about Mr. Petrosky's arrest and the reopened missing person case. Reporters start calling my phone number somehow, and 2 of them show up at the corporate housing asking the front desk to contact me. Edith helps me get a new phone number and works with building security to add my photo to a list of residents who should never have visitors announced without explicit permission. I decide to maintain limited anonymity rather than do interviews because I want to protect my privacy while the case moves forward. The attention feels like another violation, people wanting pieces of my story for their news cycles. My civil lawyer files a lawsuit against Mr. Petrosky and the building ownership company for negligence, emotional distress, and damages. The building's insurance company enters settlement discussions within a week, clearly wanting to avoid trial publicity after the news coverage. The legal process feels different from the criminal case, more businesslike and focused on money rather than justice. My lawyer explains the settlement could cover therapy costs, moving expenses, lost wages, and security equipment I had to buy. It won't undo what happened, but it removes some of the financial stress. Pre-trial conferences begin with Mr. Petrosky's lawyer trying to negotiate plea deals that would reduce charges or sentencing. Lucas firmly rejects each offer, insisting the evidence supports going to trial on all counts if necessary. The protective order violations have stopped completely now that Mr. Petrosky is in jail with all his communications monitored by the facility. I start to feel a baseline calm I haven't experienced in months, though I still check locks on my apartment 3 times before bed and verify my security cameras are recording every night. I start looking at apartments the next week, focusing on buildings with serious security. The first place I tour has keycard access for the main entrance and elevator, cameras in every hallway, and a doorman who actually checks IDs against a resident list. The landlord walks me through the security features, and I take notes on my phone, comparing against the checklist Edith helped me create. I sign the lease 3 days later, and Heidi meets me there before I move in. She installs smart locks on the door that send alerts to my phone every time they engage or disengage. We set up cameras covering the entrance, living room, and bedroom, all feeding to encrypted cloud storage with motion alerts. Moving my stuff from corporate housing into this new space feels strange, like I'm trying to remember how to build a normal life. I arrange furniture carefully, checking sightlines to doors and windows, making sure I can see the entrance from multiple angles. The apartment is smaller than my old place, but the security features let me sleep without jolting awake every hour. Delilah calls 2 weeks after I move in and says she worked out a plan with HR for me to come back to the office part-time. A security guard will meet me in the parking garage and escort me to our floor, then back down at the end of the day. My badge gets flagged, so building security knows to verify my identity extra carefully. The first day back feels overwhelming with all the normal office sounds and people moving around, but my coworkers are good about it. They ask how I'm doing without pushing for details, and having regular work conversations about projects and deadlines reminds me who I was before Mr. Petrosky invaded everything. I work from home Mondays and Fridays when I need the controlled environment of my apartment, but being in the office 3 days a week helps me feel less isolated. Delilah checks in regularly without hovering, and I'm grateful for the balance. The civil lawsuit settles 6 weeks after I move into the new apartment. My lawyer calls with the final number, and it's not huge money, but it covers everything I spent on therapy, moving costs, all the security equipment, and the wages I lost during the worst weeks. The building ownership company agrees to implement better tenant screening and safety protocols. Plus, they're installing panic buttons in all units. It won't help me or Addison, but maybe it protects future tenants. The settlement money removes the financial stress that's been sitting on top of everything else, and I can stop worrying about how to pay for the security measures I need to feel safe. Mr. E. Petrosky's criminal trial gets scheduled for 3 months out, but Lucas calls me 8 weeks later saying his lawyer wants to negotiate. They go back and forth for days, and I wait for updates, stomach tight every time my phone rings. Finally, Lucas explains the plea deal terms. Mr. Petrosky will plead guilty to stalking, burglary, identity theft, and the weapons charges from pulling the gun in my apartment. Some of the lesser counts get dismissed, but the main charges stick. The sentencing hearing happens on a cold Tuesday morning, and I sit in the courtroom with Edith while the judge reviews everything. Mr. Petrosky stands there in an orange jumpsuit, not looking at me, while the judge sentences him to 8 years in prison. He has to complete mental health treatment and register as a sex offender for life when he gets out. 8 years feels both like a long time and not nearly enough for what he did, but at least he's locked up and monitored. Catalina's sentencing happens separately because of her cooperation deal. She gets probation with mandatory counseling and community service hours. The judge orders her to have no contact with me, which I appreciate because I'm not ready to think about her as both a victim and someone who helped him. Edith mentions later that Catalina started working with a nonprofit that helps women escape exploitation and trafficking situations. Part of me hopes she finds a way forward, but mostly I just want her to stay far away from my life. Detective Simmons calls 3 months after the sentencing to update me on Addison Durham's case. The items from Mr. Petrosky's storage unit gave investigators new leads, and they reopened the investigation with fresh urgency. Addison's family got notified, and they're grateful that someone is looking again, even though there's no guarantee they'll find answers. I think about Addison a lot, wondering if she's still alive somewhere, or if Mr. Petrosky did something worse than identity theft. I make an anonymous donation to the reward fund in her name, hoping her family gets closure even if it takes years. I rebuild my daily routines slowly and carefully. I find a new yoga studio across town where nobody knows me, and I can blend into classes without explaining anything. I go to different coffee shops than before, varying my patterns so I'm not predictable. My friends understand I need flexibility with plans, and sometimes I cancel last minute if I'm having a bad day. I keep my tech security tight with encrypted messaging and regular password changes, checking my credit report monthly for any suspicious activity. The constant hypervigilance from those first months is fading into something more manageable, a healthy awareness instead of paralyzing fear. I still check my locks 3 times before bed, but I don't panic every time I hear footsteps in the hallway. I start writing everything down in a private document on my encrypted laptop. The whole experience from noticing things were off to the trial and sentencing, all the details I can remember. Maybe someday I'll share it to help other people recognize warning signs of obsessive behavior before it escalates. For now, the writing helps me process what happened and reclaim my own story instead of letting Mr. Petrosky's actions define me. Edith reads through it when I'm done and says my detailed documentation throughout the investigation was crucial to getting a conviction. The cameras, the logs, the screenshots, everything I saved made the prosecutor's job possible. 7 months after that night when Mr. Petrosky pulled a gun in my apartment, I'm sitting in my new living room with all my locks engaged and my security cameras recording. The sun is setting through my window and I'm drinking tea, checking my phone to verify the cameras are uploading footage properly. My life isn't the same as before. I'm more careful now, more aware of my surroundings, more protective of my personal information and space. I don't give out my address casually, and I screen calls from unknown numbers. I keep my social media private, and I pay attention when something feels off. The innocence of assuming landlords are trustworthy and homes are safe is gone, replaced with a harder knowledge about how people can violate boundaries. But this life is mine again. Nobody else gets to wear my face or practice my signature or study my patterns. The healing is messy and imperfect, full of bad days mixed with better ones, but I'm reclaiming myself piece by piece. My name is Gracie, and I work in marketing, and I love yoga and true crime podcasts. And this time, I'm the only one who gets to be me. And that's today's wrap-up. I try to keep these stories simple, but with a point you can actually use. Hopefully this one stuck with you. Subscribe if you'd like to keep learning through them.